Genetics helps us understand the biological programming behind all life forms. But what exactly is the science of genetics? And what does its future hold?
Although humans observed trait inheritance for thousands of years, the true science behind inheritance was just starting to be discovered and understood in the mid-19th century, starting with Gregor Mendel's experiments on pea plants. People living during this time were completely uneducated in the area of genetics and most likely didn't start learning anything until the mid-20th century. My grandparents grew up in the 20th century. I asked them questions about their current and past knowledge of genetics, and their responses really shocked me because of how little they actually knew. I started off my interview with my grandmother just by simply asking her if she knew what genetics was, if she was familiar with the term, if she knew anything about it. At first she was a little confused, but then she was able to tell me that she knew what genes were and she knows what DNA is now. And then I kind of asked her, did you learn about it in school? If so, what grade level? If not, when did you hear about it? And she couldn't really tell me a specific time, but she said she did not know what genetics was for a good part of her life. And the interesting thing is that my grandmother is foreign. She grew up in Greece. She came here in the 60s with my grandfather to get work and to start a family. So she did all of her schooling in Greece. So that leads me to believe, maybe it has to do with the fact that she's not American. She was not born here. She wasn't raised here. She didn't grow up learning about the scientists here. So I think that's very interesting, the difference between people that lived here in the 50s and people that lived elsewhere in the world in the 50s. Their understanding of genetics probably differs, and my grandmother proved that because she was completely unaware until after she adapted to the US and then she started hearing about it. The first personal question I asked her was, would you, if you had the chance, would you want to see if you could potentially get a genetic disease? And her immediate answer was yes. Yes, I would want to prepare. And I even said, what if the chance was very, very slim, a 10% chance? And she still said yes. She said there's a chance, there's still that 10% chance, and I would want to be ready for anything that happened because I don't want anything to happen to me knowing that I could have maybe stopped it or prepared for it. What was really interesting about her response was that it completely differed from my generation's approach to it. I asked her, I asked my grandmother, I asked my grandfather, I even asked my dad, would you want to know even if it was a 10% chance you could get it? And they all said yes. No hesitation. They would want to be prepared. They'd want to know what they can do. Whereas my generation, we even discussed this in class, even with a 40 to 50% chance of getting the disease, people still said, no, I would not want to know because of the anxiety and the amount of preparation I would do for nothing. So it kind of shows you like a little generational difference there. Maybe our generation is a lot less aware of the dangers maybe, or not as serious. But I thought that was very interesting, the drastic difference in the generational opinions. One other question that I asked my grandmother that where her response really stuck out to me was one about genetic privacy and, do you want your DNA private? Would you be okay with getting tests done and having your DNA public? At first she said, I really want my DNA private. I wouldn't want people to know about it. But then I brought up that girl's example that we learned about in class. The one where they used her cells without her or her family's permission and then essentially made money off of it without even notifying them or anything. So I asked her, I was like, do you think this is okay? I mean, what's your opinion? And her first opinion was, it's awful that they didn't notify her family. But she said, I don't care about the money. I don't care if I'm not informed. Obviously, that's awful, but she said, as long as it saves lives, she's okay with it. She said, even though that girl, wasn't treated fairly in that situation, she should see the real victory as being that she saved lives, and that should be enough. Her DNA saved lives despite not getting any compensation for it, which really relates to my answer as well. That's why I'm okay with having my DNA public, because if it can help lives, if it can save lives, I'll do it 1,000 times. The final topic I asked my grandparents about was the idea of new and advanced technologies in the genetics world, such as CRISPR. And I essentially just asked, if you were younger, if you were at the age of having children, would you use genetic technologies in your favor, for medical reasons and for non-medical reasons? And then I kind of asked, how do you feel about all these advancements going on? And that they said that they don't really believe in stuff like CRISPR just because they think it should be natural, especially childbirth, unless it's something's medically wrong. They said they wouldn't mess with technology because you're never 100% guaranteed anything. They said, the only way to be 100% sure of anything is just to let the process happen by itself, unless, of course, there's a life-endangering disease. Overall, it was really interesting talking to family members that were born far, far before me, because at least I've been growing up with the idea of genetics. I've always heard about it some way or another, DNA's in this, DNA's in that. But my grandparents, it's so strange to think that they never heard about any of it until maybe their 20s or 30s. So yeah, we have a lot of the same opinions, but we also have different approaches to other things. So it was really cool getting to see their responses.